What's up, everyone? Today we're here to lead you through the developer team collaboration exercise. The goal of this exercise is to practice working on the same repository with multiple members of a developer team. In this exercise, multiple developers are going to have access to the same repository. So I'll be creating a repository and then adding Reed as a collaborator, and we'll go through the process of collaborating on this repository together. Before we get into the steps of this exercise, I just want to give a high-level overview of the process. So I am going to create a new repository and I will be the owner of that repository. As a member of my developer team, I'm going to invite Reed as a collaborator on the repository, and this will give us both access to modify the repository. Then Reed is going to go through the process of downloading the repository onto his local computer. And we're going to follow pull request workflow, including branch operations. So Reed's going to check out a new feature branch and do some trivial changes on that branch and then push up the changes to GitHub. Reed is then going to create a pull request requesting that I review the changes. So I will then review the changes and merge them in, assuming they look good. And then after that, Reed is going to refresh his local repository to allow him to make future updates. All right, let's get into it. I'm going to start by creating a new repository on GitHub. So navigating to GitHub, any page, we could create a new repository using the plus sign icon at the top right and clicking new repository. So I'm going to give this repository a name, developer team collaboration exercise 2025. I'll just leave the description. We'll default to public. I will add a README file. And I think that's it for now to create the repository. Hopefully, by doing the other exercises by now, you're familiar with the process of creating a repository, but you may not have added collaborators to your repository. So now I'm going to walk you through the process of adding a collaborator. We can add a collaborator through the repository's settings menu. So I'm going to now access the settings menu. And on the left sidebar, there is a section for collaborators. So in this part of the settings, we can scroll down into the Manage Access section and click the button to add people. All right, let's give it a shot. Here we can search for GitHub users by their username. And so I'm going to search by Reed's username and invite as a collaborator. At this time, Reed, I think you will have to go into your email and click a confirmation link in your email. So we'll wait for you to do that.
Okay, so once Professor Rossetti invited me to work on that repository, I received this email where if I click on view invitation, it's going to take me to my GitHub browser. And so I can go ahead and accept the invitation to then work on this project. And I'll see the same file, the same README that was initialized. And so then I can go into my GitHub desktop and I can actually click and add and go and clone the repository from GitHub onto my laptop. And so if I click clone repository, and I believe this was called Dev Team Collaboration Exercise 2025, shared with me by Professor Rosé. I'm going to click on that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose where I want to actually store this on my computer. And so what I'd like to do is I have a folder called Dev Projects that I put all of my work into, and it'll tell me it's going to clone it into this specific path on my computer. And once I hit clone, It's going to say there's no local changes because I haven't made any changes to these files. However, if I open up my text editor of choice, such as VS Code, I can go and I can click Open Folder into Dev Projects, and now this file, this repository is now there. And so now in my text editor, Visual Studio Code, we can see that this readme.markdown file is the only file that currently exists in our repository. So the next step, once I've cloned this, is I'm going to create my own local branch where I can make changes to the files in the repository on my own section, on my own branch. And then as we will walk through the steps of actually making these changes and creating a pull request, this is the way that developers work on new features, fixing bugs without impacting and messing up other people's code. So I'm going to navigate back over to GitHub Desktop. And where it says current branch at the top, I'm going to click on and I'm going to create a new branch. A common convention is to put your username as the first word of the branch name. So for me, I'll just put read ulic. And what I'm going to, and generally after that, in your branch name, you'll want to give it a short description of what the branch is for. So I'm going to say uh, add my markdown. This can be whatever we want to make it. And I'll go ahead and click create branch. And so now this is actually checked out this branch onto my local computer. So any changes that I make will be on this different branch that then I can push back to GitHub and create a pull request so someone else can review the changes that I made before they go back and actually take effect in the main branch. And so if I navigate back over to Visual Studio Code, I can create a new file and I'm just going to call it my username.markdown. And I'm going to say, this is my markdown file, adding a few more lines, change. And once I've added this, I'm going to hit Command S to save this file. And I knew it wasn't saved because there was this little white circle at the top of VS Code. And now that I've saved this file, I'm going to go back into GitHub Desktop. And on the left, it'll show me that I've changed one file. I've added this new file, readulic.markdown. And these were the 4 lines of the file that I added. Once I'm happy with these changes, and once I want to actually add these to my Git repository and push them to GitHub, the next thing I need to do is to create a commit. And so a commit is saving the current state of all of our files on our branch at a period of time. And in GitHub Desktop, on this bottom left-hand corner, I have to give my commit a short description. And so I'm going to say added my markdown file. And then a description is optional. This is, I think, the commit message is required. And you'll notice that now this button to commit it is now selectable. I can click on this and I'm going to create a commit. So after I've gone ahead and done that, I've created a commit on this branch. The next thing I need to do is to publish this branch or push this branch to GitHub. When I went ahead and created this branch on my laptop, GitHub doesn't know about it yet. It only exists on my computer. And so to let GitHub know about my branch, I'm going to go ahead and click on this publish branch button. And so once I do that, by clicking that button, my branch that I just made on my local machine is now pushed up to GitHub. And so once it's on GitHub, the next step would be to create a pull request because there's 2 different branches. My branch has the changes that I've just made, but because we made these changes on a separate branch, our main branch doesn't know about these changes. And so if I go back over to GitHub, I'm going to make sure I refresh, we'll see that if we are just previewing the files, this main branch doesn't have the readulic.markdown file I just added. However, I can toggle between branches, and here we'll see that if I'm on my branch, this file does appear. This is what I just published to GitHub. This is what I pushed to GitHub. And what we want to do is we want to create a pull request. And so because I just made a push recently, it'll actually auto-suggest this on GitHub for me. So I can click compare and pull request. The most important thing is at this top here. It's asking what our base branch is. So this is the branch that we want to move our changes into. And compare branch, this is the branch that we just made our changes on. So I'm comparing the branch that I just changed to the main branch, which is where I want my changes to go. And so we can add a title, added my markdown file, and you can optionally add a description for a pull request. This is what if there are a lot more changes, you would usually list out this is what I changed in this pull request. And really, the goal of a good title and description is to make it as easy for someone else looking at your code to understand what the goal of the pull request is and what you have changed in it. And so here I can just say I went ahead and added my own markdown file to demonstrate creating a pull request, often short for PR. And so once I actually add this description, I can go ahead and click Create Pull Request. Once I've created that pull request, the general best practices and what we'll see most often is that you want somebody to review your code. That's really the point of a pull request is I may have made a typo if this was actual code and not just a markdown file. And so in any company or team you're working on, it's generally a good idea to have at least one person looking at the changes I made before they go back into the main branch. So now that I've created my pull request, and I want Professor Rossetti to look at these changes that I've made before merging it back into main, I'm going to request his review. And I can click on reviewers, and then I can click on his username. And once I click on his username, this will add him as a reviewer to our pull request that he will get an email for that I have requested his review on these changes. And now I'm going to pass it back over to where he can actually look at this pull request, make comments, approve it, and then go ahead and actually merge it back into main.
All right, so as a senior member on this team who is in charge of reviewing code, I see that a pull request has been made. And so we can always view all the pull requests from the pull request menu option at the top. So I'm going to check it out. And here I see there's one pull request. So I'm going to look at it. And in a moment, I will add my review, but first I'll take a look at the code. And so in the pull request menu options here, in the first tab, the conversation tab, it allows us to make comments back and forth, unofficial comments. So we could definitely talk about the changes some more. And we may go back and forth talking about different parts of the code. If multiple commits have been made on the branch before the pull request has been created, you can go to the commits tab and it will show you a commit history of just the commits made on this branch. It might be helpful for seeing the progression through time. Finally, the Files Change tab will allow me to actually view the files that have been changed. And so if there's many files that have been changed, they would all show up here. You have the option to toggle them in case you have dozens of files. You might want to toggle them and only look at one at a time. Here I see one file has been created. It's a markdown file. It looks like some markdown. Okay, cool. This code looks good to me, so I'm going to conduct my review now, clicking this button to review the changes and leaving a comment optionally looks good to me with a thumbs up. All right. And it is possible to provide an official review without approving the changes. For example, you can create a review comment or request more changes. Perhaps if I were to actually request changes, I would ask for the second level heading to be like a single level heading. But for the purposes of this demo, this is all good. And so I'm going to approve these changes and submit my review. So now in the pull request conversation tab, when we scroll down to the bottom, we see that this pull request has been approved. And so now we are ready to merge the pull request. In some repositories, a team might want to set up a rule that a pull request can't be merged until or unless the review has been approved. And so now we're ready to actually merge that pull request. So now we go through the normal pull request merge process. I'm going to click this green button to merge. I like to do a squash and merge, but since there's only one commit here, Doesn't really matter that much. And merging this, PR. We can optionally change the commit message and provide a description, but I'm just going to confirm this merge now. All right, we see in purple that this pull request has been merged. So now when we look back at the main branch of this repository on the home page of this repository, we see the most recent commit here, which was our merged pull request. And now in the commit history, we see those changes that have been proposed and approved and merged. And so this is the process that a developer team would go through to collaborate on the same repository. The reason why we're doing this pull request workflow with a developer team is because sometimes when two members of the developer team edit the same file, that might introduce conflicts into the process, but by keeping the commits on a branch, we're able to more cleanly review and merge those changes into the main branch. All right, and so we're we've updated the repository on GitHub, but there's one final step. Reed had since been working on a branch locally, but now in order to sync the changes from GitHub down to his local computer, there's a few more steps involved in the process. So Reed, I'll hand it off to you to update your local repo and get prepared to make a new change.
All right, so I'm back. This is after my change has been made on GitHub. My pull request has been merged. However, you'll notice that this isn't immediately updated on my own computer, right? My computer doesn't know that on GitHub we went and actually merged this branch and now main contains the same commit. And I can prove this if I click on the default branch main and I go back over to VS Code, this file is gone. Like we'll see that in the file explorer here, it no longer exists. And what I need to do is I need to fetch any updates from main, from our remote repository, from GitHub. And so to do that, I'm just going to click fetch origin. And what this does is it says it goes and checks to see if any new commits have been added to main. It doesn't necessarily change anything yet. It's just updating it and seeing if there's been any changes. And now we'll see that there actually have been because we get this message to say pull origin. It says pull one commit because now it knows about that commit we just made on GitHub. And so if I actually click pull origin, and now I go back over to my VS Code, you'll notice that this file is now here because I've updated my local copy of the repository and I've synced it back with GitHub. And now if I wanted to create a new branch off of main and add a new feature and modify more files, the same steps that we just did, where I would check out a local branch, publish it to GitHub, submit the pull request, and then resync my changes after it had been merged on GitHub is the same thing that how we would operate if we wanted to make more changes.
So this was the process that developer teams can use to collaborate on the same coding project.
This is a very common pattern that pretty much every development team uses, and hopefully this was helpful.
Thanks, Reed, and see
Thank you.
everyone in class.